Alright, if you have been working out for any bit of time now, you've probably wondered, like, how did working out even start? And I had this question multiple times that I was like, dude, I'm done. I'm gonna do some research and make a video on this. So, here we are. I did some research, and here's the video on how did working out become a thing. Alright, so first of all, we're going to start during the caveman times, right? So most of you guys already know we had to hunt, so we'd be running, doing all of that, right? But we wouldn't really call that exercise at the time. We just call that like a daily life. We got to go hunt, and we got to go lift like tree limbs, lift rocks. We got to run for our lives sometimes. Sometimes we got to fight, you know what I mean? There's so much stuff we got to do back then. We don't really call it exercise, and we were just jacked, sometimes more jacked than we are now. But that was because it was a way of life. Now, at around 10,000 BC, the crop culture era came around right after we were cavemen, right? So instead of having to go hunt our stuff, we have crops, right? So it reduced us having to run, it reduced all of that stuff, right? So sure, we'd have to do work, but it would be repetitive. So it would be like reaping whatever we're planting, you know what I mean? It's repetitive instead of climbing a tree or climbing a ladder, stuff like that. And it's just little stuff that add up. At around 4000 BC, we had wars, right? We had the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, all of them. They were training their soldiers. Now, this was a little bit more advanced, right? So back then we were just doing it because it was a way of life. Now we're actually training. So now we're actually practicing running. We're actually practicing lifting heavy crap. We're doing stuff that we used to do back then, but now we're doing it with like more what's the word? We're doing it with like a program around it, if that makes sense. So instead of just doing it to do it back then because it was the way of life, now we're doing it because we need to. Now it's a time of war. And that's what they did. And at the same time, the Egyptians and Greeks made games out of this too, right? So they made like little sports and stuff, and of course it would match what happened back then because it's not too much more advanced, right? So they'd be doing like running stuff, like fighting stuff. And the Greeks had the first Olympic Games right after this era. From the 5th century right up to the 15th century, it was the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. That's when everyone was so focused on the soul and the mind that nobody really focused on the body, right? The body wasn't really that important to them. It was all about just the soul. This lasted for a really long time. This was 10 centuries, but right after that, that's when we got the Renaissance, right? And this is when it was a game changer. People were focused on anatomy, biology, they were focused on their own physical fitness, working out, getting themselves into shape. In 1440, this is when Vittorino da Feltre made his first school, and this school was focused on physical education, right? So this was the first school that people were actually focusing on being healthy. In 1553, Cristobal Mendez wrote the book De Art de Gymnastique, and that is when everything was game-changing. This Renaissance is when people actually started working out, and this is that little shift that transformed from just lifting crap to like actually working out, if that makes sense. So this is how working out actually became a thing. If you learned anything in this video, please support me by hitting that like button and subscribing. Turn on post notifications so you don't miss another video. Peace out.